Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior and Community Center. I'm Reed Price. And with me today, Fran Korten and Mike Cox. We're going to be talking about solar power. Although the Trump administration has been rolling back support, solar power continues to sweep the country and the world. We'll talk a little bit about why the industry is thriving and what you can do to solarize your own home and what we can do to solarize our community. But I would like to begin by thanking Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for being a sponsor of Something to Talk About. Fieldstone offers independent living, assisted living, and memory care up on Rolling Bay. They have day stay and respite care programs. If you'd like to take a tour, call Randy O'Neill or Sierra Wood. The number is 206 594 1010. That's 206 594 1010. They'll be happy to treat you to lunch or dinner. You can also check out the website at fieldstonecommunities.com. And when we think about taking care of our environment, it makes me think of the acknowledgement that we owe to the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water. The Suquamish have lived on these waters of the Salish Sea since time immemorial, and we are learning from their stewardship of these lands and waters and appreciating how we can do a better job ourselves at being stewards. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is to think about being conservative in the way that we get our energy and use our resources. And to that end, I want to thank Fran Korten and I want to thank Mike Cox for joining us today to talk a little bit about solar power. So uh, thank you both.
Well, thanks for asking us, Reed.
The pleasure
Um,
to be here.
let's talk a little bit to begin with about how, as I said at the beginning, the economics of solar power, despite some bad news bears, continues to improve and it's becoming both more efficient as a technology and more economical for folks to consider adopting in their own lives. Fran, you want to start us on that?
Yeah, sure. So let me just mention to everybody a book that has recently come out from Bill McKibben. Here Comes the Sun. And he's the one who has really been helping people become aware of the momentum behind solar. And I just want to read a very short passage from this book because I think some of us and some of your listeners know of Bill McKibben. Uh, he became well known back in the 80s when he wrote The End of Nature. And that was really the first kind of popular book that sounded the alarm about climate. And he has been sounding the alarm ever since. And so what he notes is that he's been chronicling these early warnings as each of them came true. And he says, and yet, right now, really for the first time, I can see a path forward, a path lit by the sun. So that's Bill McKibben. And the path forward is indeed because the economics have changed. So solar right now is the cheapest and fastest way to generate new energy compared to anything else. So we hear a lot about how we need a lot of new energy. Well, this is the cheapest way. And as a result, over the last year, 91% of new energy was from a combination of solar and wind, with almost all of that coming from solar. So a cool thing about this is it's not a red-blue issue. The state that is doing the most solar and the most wind is Texas. And one of the top ones is also Oklahoma and Iowa. So it's not like this is just like California or Washington or New York or something. It's a red-blue issue. And the reason is these economics. So Bill was so eager to have everybody, particularly in the United States, really understand this, especially in light, as you mentioned, Reed, of the propaganda from the Trump administration, um, that Bill encouraged the chapters of a group called Third Act. They have chapters all over the country, and he encouraged all of them to do a Sun Day event. And that was on the equinox, September 21st. And on Bainbridge, we did one at the public library. And the reason we did it at the public library is that they're putting solar on their roof. And they expect to get it up next month. So we celebrated their accomplishments, and we also helped people understand this phenomenon of how solar is spreading not only across the United States, but all across the world. Um, in countries like Pakistan, because the solar panels are so cheap, people just put them up. They got a lot of sun, and it now, I think, is up to about 40% of their electricity production. And of course, China is way, way ahead.
And I know, Fran, when I was watching the baseball, the American League Championship, one of the ads I saw was about emergency power, and it had a name. The name of the company was For Patriots, sort of a, you know, macho sounding name, and it is a rechargeable battery using solar power that you set up in your backyard. And so that's an example of a sort of a red tinged marketing towards solar power.
And what an audience, huh? Oh my God. The whole country. So anyway, we put on this Sunday event at the library, and we talked about all these facts I've just been reciting. And then we had people go and talk with experts. We lined up a whole bunch of different people. We had homeowners, we had an installer, we had people who worked on community buildings like Helpline House and the St. Barnabas Church. So we had a whole bunch of different people they could talk to. Joe Dietz has been a real advocate on our council. He was there. The, the people that most people wanted to talk to were the homeowners. And what we realized is that they wanted to talk to the homeowners because they wanted to know how to do this for themselves. So that was a big lesson that we took away from that. And Mike Cox has told me a lot of people ask him, how do you do this? And what does it look like? And how does your bills? And what do you do in the dark months, et cetera?
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about when the sun goes down, there's no power.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So maybe Mike can talk about that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Just to amplify a couple of things that Fran said that I'm a nerd, so I find fascinating, is just as an example, the wind, where I know we're talking about solar, but wind, 58% of Iowa's production, electrical production comes from wind, 58%. And it goes down the wind belt, Kansas 43, Oklahoma 35, North Dakota 31. So as Fran said, this isn't really a red-blue issue. And it kind of boggles my mind that these red states there aren't getting a little grumpy about the wind stuff personally, but that's me. And second, we need to really distinguish between what is called utility scale solar and our own homes. And the utility scale solar, as Fran said, 70% of newly installed generated capacity from these utility in 2024 was from solar. 70% of the new generating capacity is from solar. I mean, that's amazing. And you don't have to be a brilliant person to go back to the economics. But let's go to the question of what do people need to know about installing solar? What I did, and I encourage people, is go through a couple questions. first of all, ask yourself, why do you want solar? Is this because it makes you feel good? You think it's going to make you money? Whatever the case, ask that question. Why do you want solar? Then the second one is, what percentage of electricity do you want from your solar? Because that's going to determine how big a system you have. And so that's a question. Then there's a whole bunch of other questions. How old's your roof? Do you want batteries in there for battery storage? What payback period do you want? All those kind of questions. But really, once you start answering those questions, what you need to do is get 2 to 3 estimates. I did. And the person who I chose came into my house, did an assessment, and said, Mike, we're going to have to cut down those 3 trees if this is going to make sense. And so I said, okay, I got to cut down these, 50, 60-year-old trees. It wasn't an easy decision. My wife wasn't too happy, but she left for the weekend and we cut them down. I'm kidding. It didn't happen. But
Well, you
so,
did have to probably, you live on Bainbridge, right?
yeah,
So you did have to check with the city too.
no, if it's only, well, it was 2 big ones. There was certain, I checked. So I was under the threshold for doing it. So it was okay, but good point, Reed. Don't get me in trouble. But then what the installer came in and they do want to know, I wanted to not have 100%. One, because my roof wasn't able to take all that capacity. So they come in and do a whole review and they say, well, we might be able to get you up to 80% given your location. And people have to remember, some locations, it's just not going to be, you can't do it. Too many trees, too many trees. And there was actually a report done by the Department of Energy that looked at our island, and they concluded, looking at our island, that we could generate between about 15 and 25% of our electricity from solar power on rooftops. Right now, we're at 2%. So, and they did the assessment, looking at the tree canopy, and made that determination. So there is possibility for growth here for sure. Couple other quick questions that you need to answer is your roof. Our roof was only 2 years old. He said, that's great. If your roof is 10, 15 years old, it gets a little dicey because these panels are good for 20 to 25 years. So you put them on, you got to replace the roof, you got to take them off. So my point here is there's lots of questions you need to ask yourself. And the installer that I had was great. We talked and he answered all the questions. And in the end, right now, I get about, first year was installed, about 80% of the electricity that we needed, I got from my solar panels. Got an electric car, that's gone down a little bit. So overall, my payback here for the solar panels is going to be about 15 years. Now, the caveat to that is I got a 30% federal credit. That credit is gone or going to be gone. So the payback period is going to be a little longer for people now, just to be full disclosure. So, but it varies the size, probably 10 to 15 years, maybe a little longer now without the federal credit, but it's doable. The last thing I'll say is there's been estimates that it increases your sale value of your house about 5 to 10%, depending on where you are. But so it's a plus in terms of selling your house back. And then the final one is financing. And we don't have to get into that, but there's a whole range of things on financing that you can do that people can look at and their opportunities.
Which
So
would
anyway,
then play into the payback time, obviously.
yeah, if you pay with cash, obviously it's cash. If you take a loan out, there is something called a PPA, which is a power purchase agreement, where somebody will come in and put the panels on your house, all the operation and maintenance. You pay a fee to them per month for electricity, which is cheaper than PSC would charge you. You have a contract. The challenge is if you leave, then there's issues with the contract. So it gets a little bit dicey there. But that's another way to fund solar panels.
Okay, yeah. So obviously the business has been going long enough that some of these things have been worked out, and the technology has improved every year. And so the efficiency, the likelihood that you're going to get closer to 80% in your location is increased because the panels are more sensitive than they were when we first started talking about this. Well, when Bill
Yeah,
started talking about this, it was several years ago, but
right. So let me ask Mike a couple of questions. Mike, when did you put your panels on?
We put them on in the winter of 2023.
Okay,
So we've had them on about
a
2
couple of
years.
years ago. All right.
Couple of years, yeah.
So in your payback period calculations, what assumptions are you using about the increase in the cost of electricity?
Well, there's calculators. I should say
Yeah,
that. There are calculators that you
yeah.
can use that I
Okay.
used to calculate, and they put that in the calculator. So I
Okay.
don't remember
Yeah,
the
exactly.
inflation, but there's a couple calculators that are great.
Right. Because here's the thing. I think those calculators may underestimate the future cost of electricity because the electric companies are going to need to build more transmission, and it's extremely expensive to do that. So my hunch is that the price of electricity is going to go up more than those calculators assume because they're based on the past, and consequently the payback period would be shorter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is entirely, excuse me, possible. And like the National Renewable Energy Lab has the one I think is really good. So it's good.
Hmm.
It's a good question. I just assumed what they had was good, but maybe I'll go back and look and see what they did
so
actually.
National Renewable Energy Lab.
Yeah, it's called PV Watts Calculator,
Yeah,
and
and
that's a really cool one.
I think that when Fran was talking, well, maybe you were talking about this, when you're thinking about the reasons you're doing this,
Hmm.
there are a lot of things that come into play. Also, some of those assumptions, when you're making assumptions about um, what you're going to do with the money in your retirement account, and you're looking at the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or whatever, you have to make some judgments based on your own understanding about what might happen. Fran's suggesting that she knows enough to think that, yeah, I mean, the current expectation around infrastructure, it's definitely a reasonable suggestion that there are going to be some big costs related to continuing to supply electricity. And of course, as we start to, we've seen this even on the island, as we start to rely more on electricity as a method for propelling our ferries and our cars, um, more transmission lines need to be put in, and um, we can sort of safeguard ourselves to some degree about being part of the energy generating enterprise, not just the energy using enterprise. So I'm curious about the battery concept because I know that most of the ways this works, um, you hook up with Puget Sound Energy and they get the power that you're capturing through the sun, and you see that reflected in your monthly bill. But some people have battery backups as well. How does that work?
Well, the battery, that's interesting. When they were here, I asked the guy about the battery, and he said, "This was me." He said, "Well, unless you want it for emergency situations, he was not recommending it for here because in the summer when you have excess, you're not going to be able to use it. It goes back into the grid, and we use very little. In the winter, we don't, to be honest, generate much solar." So the battery, in his mind, was a little iffy. Two, the batteries that we'd have our house are probably pretty small unless you want to get a whole Tesla wall that are very expensive. On the other hand, we have a couple hubs. We have 13 hubs on the island. I think two or three now have solar with batteries because that's what they're going to need if they have backup. On a bigger scale, on the utility side, batteries are essential. We're going to have good battery storage if solar and wind are going to be utilized in what they call the base load what we need in order to not have blackouts or what they call them, roving brownouts. They
Brownouts,
call them
right?
brownouts, yeah. So that's, I don't know if that's answering your question. They're getting much better. The materials they're using are much better than they were, and there's a lot of innovation. The downside is that there was a lot of money going into research that now has been terminated. And even in our own labs, the PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, had hundreds of millions of dollars in battery research gone. So that's a negative. So I don't know if that answers your question, Reed.
Well, it both answers my question and poses new questions. Um, so the other thing that we wanted to talk about a little bit is coming out of that Sunday activity that happened at the library. You were thinking about what, as a community, we might be able to do to solarize, what the next steps are as a community. Do Mike
Right.
or Fran want to answer that? Talk to that.
Yeah, I'll pick up on this. So, Mike and I conferred after the Sunday event and this whole understanding of how a lot of people kind of want to know the sort of specifics that Mike just outlined. And we felt that it would be a service to the community to put on a solar fair. And we're considering doing that in late April or early May, probably at the Woodward School. And it would be full of people who know very practical things. So we'd have a bunch of homeowners, we'd have installers, we'd have people speaking to the financing part, to the permitting part, would have folks that anybody could talk to really get up to speed about what they might do for their own home. And an idea that came up on a meeting last night that Mike led is to have a set of people who are solar ambassadors. So they're not just at the solar fair, but they're available to people to check in with sometime, any time, maybe over the next year or so. And also the idea came up of doing some solar tours. So if one or two or three people are willing to have people come to their home, we'd have a tour that some set of people could come to those homes, see the setup. Some of them do have batteries. We people could come to the home, sort of see how it looks, see the people's bills. They could even post their bill, their electricity bill, show off their battery and tell about what the battery does for them, etc. So those are some future events that we are considering. And related to that, uh, this group Third Act that Bill McKibben founded has a campaign, national campaign to simplify solar. One of the things that makes solar more expensive here than it is in other countries is that our permitting process tends to be very slow. And the goal is to have a whole campaign to get our city to improve the speed with which they issue permits. And there are some technologies that can help them do that, to get PSC to speed up their inspections, and to have the city lower their fees for installing solar. So that's another sort of political campaign side of this. And related to that is to make regulations that enable what's often called balcony solar or plug-in solar. So Utah passed a law enabling balcony solar. So if you want to do small-scale solar in Utah, you go to your Home Depot and purchase the number of solar panels you want, and you stick them on your balcony or stick them someplace that they get the sun. You plug it in and you're done. No permit, no inspection, no nothing. So this is all part of the Simplify Solar campaign. Now, those installations aren't going to produce a whole ton of electricity, but maybe they run your refrigerator or they do something that you want. Um, so the last thing I'll mention is the potential to do some community solar projects. And I think that Laura Reiser, our climate change person at the city, is interested in this. Some of you may remember way back 2012, I think, um, Joe Dietz wasn't on the council. He was just passionate about solar. And he suggested that we put solar on the city hall roof. And people contributed to that. And they built those solar panels and they're there to this day. So maybe there are some community projects that we might be able to do. So anyway, you can see there's lots of possibilities to really bring our community into the solar age.
Well, I know, Mike, you're involved in something called the Citizens Climate Lobby. So there are interested groups who are seeing, and I'm thinking those are like-minded individuals who are interested in learning more and helping each other. Are there any other groups that you might want to suggest to people who might want to connect? I know that if somebody wants to follow the work that you're doing and find out about whether this, this fair happens in April and May, obviously we'll share the news as soon as you tell us, but
Yeah, no, we have actually a coalition we met a while ago called a Climate Mixer. We had the Third Act Citizens Climate Lobby, we had Eco Adapt, we had the city's climate committee, we had the Interfaith Council Climate Circle, we had I'm forgetting names here, but we had like 6 or 7 local groups, Sustainable Bainbridge there, and that's who's going to be working on the solar fair, is a combination, and the city, of course, to do that. So all those people are good.
There are a lot of ways to plug in and see what's going on and be
Yeah.
a part of it.
But Reed, I had a question for you, or
yeah.
maybe Ed. We heard maybe solar on the senior center remodel. Is that
So the
in the
situation,
works?
so the situation at the senior community center is we're in the process of trying to raise capital funds to build an expanded senior and community center. We're looking to at least have it silver certified LEED, and we're looking at the plumbing. We're trying, in fact, we had a meeting this week with a resilience group out of Seattle that reviewed our plans and made suggestions about things like solar and water retention and ways to make it a good place for an emergency hub in the event of a disaster. We are currently planning to engineer to support resilience activities, but our current price tag is $19 million before we buy the panels or the batteries or anything. And
But
that's a
think
big
about
price
that,
tag.
Reed. That's a
And
small
then,
cost of the 19 million as a
well,
percentage.
no, it is right. That 19
Okay.
million doesn't include any of the actual panels. So it
Okay.
would be more than that.
Right.
And, I think that one of the things that we're looking at as we go through this process is to engineer in a way so that any steps that we can take as a follow-on are as inexpensive as possible. So we're not running into engineering problems when we try to activate solar, or we're not running into engineering problems when we're trying to put up an emergency antenna to help activate Bainbridge Prepares. So as part of our goal to make it a community center, ideally, yes, it would include solar. And if it doesn't include it in the first push, I'm hoping that I mean, I've talked with Fran about the idea. I don't know whether they'll be there, but there are state and regional grants in addition to the federal money that might be going away, um, that will be available that we will definitely apply for.
Yeah.
I think that that's a good idea whenever we're looking at a community resource, just like we always are talking about, is there a housing impact that we could do here whenever we're looking at development? Is there a solar power or a energy resilience we could do here whenever we're doing a community project? Totally agree. Ed, you had a question or comment.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment that I heard Fran say that one of the things they were thinking about doing to get the community involved was to have tours of places, families that have the solar on their roof. And when we lived in Davis, one of our neighbors had the solar installed on his roof. And after it was installed and working for a while, he invited me down and he took me over to his panel. And it was, he was just so enthusiastic because the sun was out this day and you could see the panel and it was going round and round and round. And he said, all of this energy is going into the grid. And then he explained to me how the payback was. But it was just really, it brings the impact right up front there when you see your electrical, all the little twirly things, your meters going around there, and you're saying, okay, the sun is working. I mean, you can just see the transformation between the solar panel and the electricity, and you see it, your meter going around. It's like, okay, I can get behind this. So I thoroughly endorse the idea that
Of a tour, huh?
Yeah,
would.
I'm active at Eagle Harbor Congregational Church, and we put solar panels up there. And Dave Beamer, who helped with the organizing of that, is very fond of pulling out his telephone because you don't even need a fancy panel. Any day, it's always on your phone.
Yeah.
He shows how we can see what sun we're harvesting, what power we're harvesting there.
Right. So I want to turn back for a moment. Reed, you mentioned that there are grants available. And I think everybody that listens to this probably knows about the Climate Commitment Act. There was a time when there was a millionaire, Reid Hoffman, that wanted to cancel that Climate Commitment Act. We all mobilized and retained it. That Climate Commitment Act, its source of funds are from big companies that want to have an allowance to produce emissions. Over the last 2.5 years, it has gained the state $5 billion. This is serious money, and it's state money. Trump can't touch it. One of the many things they do with that money, it has to be related to climate. The legislature assured that. One of the things they do is they do community grants to help communities put solar on the roof. So, for example, the Bethany Lutheran Church, they got one of these grants, both for their church and also for the Finch Affordable Housing. St. Barnabas got one of these grants. Helpline House got a different set of grants that comes from the same money. So this is a source of money that eventually, when the senior center's new building is further along on its fundraising, may be able to get. You would be ideal for it because one of the criteria is that in some way it has to help vulnerable people. Well, you're a resilience center. You're a center that opens when it's cold and people can stay inside. So you qualify very well. And this is another aspect to what we can see in the future of other buildings that can apply for these grants that pay, frankly, for all of it. At St. Barnabas, their grant covers all of their solar expenses. So that's an important source in the future.
Okay, thank you, Fran Korten. Thank you, Mike Cox. Very informative discussion here today, and check in with Sustainable Bainbridge and with the climate folks and pay attention to what's going on with our city hall. There are movements in all those directions that can help to make us a more solarized, pardon the
Absolutely.
term, solarized community.
Thank you for inviting us, Reed. A pleasure to do this.
Yep, that was fun.